Death is perhaps life's harshest lesson, and yet it's one that's only ever learnt by the non-religious. The religious grieve, of course, but they ultimately see death as an illusion, as a gateway to another place, be it heaven, Aru, Nirvana, or Valhalla. Whereas the non-religious, to quote Hemant Mehta,
understand the finality of death.
We see death for what it is, death, the final and permanent ending of our existence. But truth always comes at a price, and in this case it's heavy. Unlike the religious, who can soothe their grief with delusions of grandeur, and who are convinced must only find a way to say goodbye for now, we must soothe our grief with science, art and philosophy, and find a way to say goodbye forever. Now, I'm no expert on death, but I nevertheless want to share with you my perspective on the subject, in the hope that it will one day help you. Or more accurately, both I and the vibrant YouTuber, Rachel Oates, want to do this. This is Grief Without Belief, how to deal with death as an atheist. In dealing with death, we're really dealing with two relevant but distinct facts. The first is our own demise, and the second is that of our loved ones. Let's start with our own. The realization that we are going to die, that our consciousness and all of our memories will one day permanently cease to exist, is absolutely terrifying, and it's meant to be. We have distinctly evolved to avoid and fear death, and so it's no surprise that we don't want to relinquish all that we are. As someone who's never been religious, I was once terrified by death, and so I can only imagine that for those of you who used to have comforting delusions, that death is all the more scarier. In fact, this reminds me of an analogy that I used within my collaboration with Genetically Modified Skeptic. If you were brought up to believe that death is an illusion and that you'll live forever in paradise, then you were brought up to believe that you had won the lottery, and only now, after planning your whole life on the assumption you're rich, have you found out that you're poor. While you haven't lost anything physical, you have lost something psychological. You've lost, to be perhaps a bit blunt, the perfection of narcissism that comes with religion. The idea that everything is created with you in mind, and that you'll never die. But as for fearing death itself, I promise you that it's irrational. The evidence overwhelmingly indicates that you've got absolutely nothing to worry about. Of course, the process of dying might unfortunately be horrendous, but that's the price of life. Death itself, however, need not scare you. It's often said that dying is like going to sleep for a very long time, but if I'm brutally honest, I've always found this rhetoric terrifying, boring, and above all, simply not true. Sleep is a state of altered consciousness and inhibited sensory activity, whereas death is the absence of consciousness and sensory activity. Being dead is not like being asleep, and we don't have to experience death to know this. But rant aside, I think that Mark Twain perhaps put best why we ought not fear death. He once remarked that, "I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it." Of course, this isn't technically true, because a prerequisite of death is that one must have previously been alive. But the essence is true. Your consciousness and memories did not exist before your birth, and you did not suffer the slightest inconvenience from it. And so in death, when your consciousness and memories evaporate, it'll almost certainly be the same. You really need not fear death. So that's my primary thoughts regarding my own death, and for what it's worth, I hope that you got something out of it. But in case you didn't, here's Rachel to give you her thoughts.
As an atheist, obviously I don't believe in an afterlife, so to me, that makes this life all the more important and meaningful. It's our one and only life, it's our only opportunity, and I believe that we should make the most of that and enjoy that to the fullest. Now, I don't really want to put too much of a downer on things, but this idea of like death and grief is a pretty serious topic, and because of that I do want to talk about something quite serious, and it's a bit of a personal story and it's a difficult one to tell, but I feel it's an important one to kind of illustrate where I'm coming from with this view, and it's about something that was important in helping me become the person I am today, and also in helping me form a lot of the views and opinions I have today. And I know Stephen was all lovely before, and he's just like, oh, I'm a vibrant person, and now I feel like I'm going to put a big downer on that, but I think it's an important thing to talk about. I spent quite a few of the last few years feeling quite sad, and I've had to take some form of like antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication for the last like 5 or so years. I still take them today now, but it just like, took a lot of time to find the right one that worked for me, and I tried out a few different ones, and I've seen counsellors, and I've worked through a lot of things, and I'm in a really, really great place today. But at some of my lowest points over the last few years, let's just say death, or more specifically my own death, was something that I thought a hell of a lot about. When you're in a bad place like that, and when you're not really happy, and when you consider that the alternative is this eternity of nothingness, that sounds very, very appealing. That's like everything you want, Like Stephen just said, like in death, your consciousness and your memories, they don't exist. And further than that, like your feelings don't exist, your anxieties don't exist, none of it. And you can argue, well, so that means, no more happiness. But at the same time, it also means no more hurt. And at the time, that sounded so appealing. And not to sound horrible, but I kind of like made peace with this idea of dying. Like it wouldn't, like it would be okay. It wouldn't be so bad. Like there was nothing to be scared of. It was like my own death wasn't something to fear anymore, right? It was actually, it seemed like a pretty appealing solution. But it was only when one of my counsellors started asking me all these questions that I began to kind of change my mind about that. She got me to think about my best friend at the time, James, and I still love James to bits. He's an amazing person. But she started asking me how I'd feel if James started saying the same things and if he started to come to these conclusions. And at first I was just like, oh, well, if he's made peace with it and he thinks it's best for him, then, why does my opinion matter? And then she was like, okay, that's fine, good for James, he's sorted, but now you're left without him. How do you feel? And that was like when it hit me, because something that should have been so obvious just suddenly became clear to me. It's like, just because one life is over doesn't mean the world suddenly ends. That was something I hadn't really thought about before. Like, if I died, I wouldn't have a consciousness anymore, but other people still do. If I died, I might not have memories anymore, but other people still do. I might not have to face the consequences of any of my actions, but other people still do. And it was like at that point that I realised that while I might not fear my own death, in my situation, it wasn't fair to other people, to people I cared about, to people I love. It wasn't fair to them for me to kind of wish my death along sooner. And so what I guess I'm trying to say is that now I try and live my life knowing that when I do eventually die, because let's be honest, it happens to everyone, when I do eventually die, whether it's by accident or I get ill or I get old, when that happens, it's not something I should be scared of, because I'm doing everything I can to make the most of my life now and be happy now and to make other people happy now. And I'm doing everything that I can to leave behind something awesome while I can. However, now I'm also aware that when I do eventually die, it's going to be difficult for people who are left behind in one way or another. Maybe some people will miss me. Maybe some people will be happy I'm gone. Maybe some people will just be like, oh god, now I have another body to deal with. Like undertakers or whatever. But the point is, I've realised that while my death isn't something for me to fear, it's still going to have an effect on other people in one way or another. I think that everyone can get something out of living this life to the fullest. However, that said, I think that as an atheist, we do kind of appreciate it a little bit more. It does feel a little bit more real. It does feel a little bit more important. We do take kind of this life a little bit more seriously because we're not just waiting for the next step. We realise that this is it, this is all we have. And also I think it's kind of nice that we can live without fear as well, because we're not worried about what's going to happen after. We just know we have to enjoy it now.
Cheers, Rachel. Very insightful and much appreciated. So, now that we've addressed our own demise, let's move on to what is, in my opinion, the harder fact of death, the demise of our loved ones. Now, since the topic of death is personal, I feel like it's only right that I speak about it personally. Plus, this will illustrate that for all my use of rationality, I am yet still human. A few months ago, my hero and grandfather, Tony Mills, who I loved very much, sadly passed away due to prostate cancer. And during the months leading to his death, me and his loved ones had to witness him slowly but surely lose his dignity, memory, sanity and hope, until there was nothing left but a cold and lifeless husk. Truly, it was a ghastly experience, but it's unfortunately not a rare one. Since cancer is the second leading cause of death, it's very likely that you too have either had this experience or sadly one day will. And just as a side note, please know that you're not alone. Reach out to people, even if it's just on a forum or through the comment section of this video. You really are not alone. Now, I'm very fortunate in the fact that a considerable proportion of my family are non-religious, and so I didn't feel alone. I had people around me that also acknowledged that they had had their last ever conversation with Tony, and that they will never see him again. And this helped me a lot. My religious family, however, while of course grieving, took comfort in what is to me meaningless drivel. They told me that he's looking down on you with pride, and that you'll be reunited with him one day. One family member even told me that he's up there with his old pet donkey. I mean, just how gullible can you get? I know that we're a stupid ape, but this just never ceases to surprise me. And yes, my grandfather used to have a pet donkey. Anyhow, as part of my grieving process, I reflected long and hard about the finality of his death, and it led me to write the following, which I'd like to share with you for a reason that I'll explain afterwards. After kicking cancer's arse for years, telling everybody that he's got radioactive balls, and smiling throughout, Tony has unfortunately lost his battle, and we have lost a light that will forever darken the world, and I have lost the greatest man that I have ever known. Still, the lessons he taught me shine through in this very moment, for I know that because he shaped so many of us with his kindness, decency and love, he lives on through us, not consciously of course, but through the parts of us that he shaped and inspired. And so, in a very real sense, he's gone but not gone. And I don't know about you, but I will forever recognise the parts of me that he shaped and smile each and every time I do. I will miss you, Grandad, and I will always love you. Now, I don't mean to drop an emotional bomb on you, but this is death we're dealing with, and to address it with anything but emotion simply won't do. Anyhow, the reason I share this with you is because it's true. Marcus Aurelius once said that what we do in life echoes in eternity, and just as my grandfather echoes through me, so too do your deceased loved ones echo through you. The bricks of your foundation still bear their fingerprints. This realization gave me great comfort, and it inspired me to search for similar reflections on death that are equally true. And in my search, I was fortunate enough to find an essay by Aaron Freeman called "A Eulogy from a Physicist." Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read enough to give you the gist, and I'll leave a link in the description to the whole essay. You want a physicist to speak at your funeral. You want the physicist to talk to your grieving family about the conservation of energy, so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want the physicist to remind your sobbing mother about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy is created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want your mother to know that all of your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle that was her beloved child remains with her in this world. You want the physicist to tell your weeping father that amid energies of the cosmos, you gave as good as you got. And so that's my primary thoughts regarding the death of my loved ones. It's no heaven, granted, but unlike the false promise of heaven, it's true. Anyhow, here's Rachel to once again give you her views.
So I'm not quite as good with words as Stephen is, not quite as articulate, but Stephen's line just now about how the bricks of your foundation still bear their fingerprints really stuck with me, and I think it perfectly sums up everything that I want to talk about here, and I think it's a wonderful little statement that really does mean a lot, and also it sounds way better than anything I could have come up with. But on the subject of dealing with grief and death of other people you love, I've never met my granddads. They both died a long time before I was born, and a part of me growing up, and a part of me even now, worries that I missed out on something there. I would have loved to have had a granddad. I saw friends, and I still see them today, talking about their granddads and how great they are and how brilliant they are. I see people with granddads on TV, and I'm like, I wish I'd had that. I wanted to experience that. So for a long time, I kind of felt a little bit of resentment that, you know, death had taken away something from me before I'd even experienced it. That just did not seem fair. That said, when I was younger, my family always used to tell me how much alike I was to one of my granddads in particular. They'd always be like, oh, she's just like him, and things like that. And it took me a long time to realise that that wasn't because I was some like ghostly reincarnation of him, but that was because my family never let his memory go. My sister taught me how to fold paper airplanes just like he taught her. My uncle taught me to play cards, and we'd gamble with chocolate coins, just like he used to with his dad when he was younger. I picked up the same sense of humour and the same kind of style of telling stupid jokes and stories, because even years after he was gone, my family would still share his jokes and the stories he used to tell, and I picked that up. And I think that just goes to show how even after someone's gone, even if you've never met them, they can have an incredible impact on who you are. And of course, the family I knew personally and lost had an even bigger impact on me. I lost both my grandmothers within a year of each other when I was growing up, and that was a really, really hard time. Especially losing my granny, who I was really, really close with, and to this day, she's still one of the most amazing people I've ever met. Even though I only knew them for 7, 8, 9 years, those memories I have are so important to me. I keep so many small things to remember them by, especially my granny. So you've probably seen I have a lot of stuffed animals in some of my videos if you watch my channel. But that's because I always kind of collect them because of the memories they hold. So this little girl here, my little lamb, this is a Lullaby, and my granny bought her for me on the last holiday I ever went on with her. And Lullaby is probably nearly 20 years old now. She's, don't tell her this, but she's looking a little bit old and battered. She has to have baths quite regularly, but she's gorgeous and I love her, and she's always been everywhere with me because of the memories she holds and how important she is to me. Same with little Growl here. My sister bought him for me on the last day that I ever saw my granny, and he was with me as I said goodbye to her. You know, I keep them both for the memories that I have with her, and I keep things like books and board games that we used to play together. Even though she's gone, I still have those memories and they're still really important to me. But most importantly, I keep the things that she taught me and the person that I am today. Even though she never got to see me become an adult, I think a lot of the good qualities I have are what she helped to shape. She always encouraged my creativity, and she always kept every single drawing and painting I did for her. And after she died, my parents actually found them all and gave them back to me, which was so sweet. We used to play games together, like this one where she would draw a load of like squiggles or dots or something on a piece of paper, and then I would come along and turn it into like an actual drawing. And I remember there was this one where I drew like managed to somehow see in the squiggles a bunny building a snowman, and she was just like, how do you even see this? And she was just always so encouraging, and I loved that. I mean, like, not even like blood family as such, but my dog Jasper, he died when I was a teenager, but he was there when I was growing up, and he was my best friend. He was like a little brother to me, even though he was a dog. And as silly as it might sound to some people, he taught me so much about kindness and just how to love someone unconditionally, even if they accidentally use your carpet as a toilet. And I'm like, if you can forgive that, you can forgive a lot of things with someone you love. But all that said, as much as I miss the people that I've lost, or never even got a chance to meet. As much as I miss them, I know that death was a final ending for them. I'm not holding on to some hope that I'm gonna eventually meet them or be reunited with them again. And I think in a lot of cases that was the best thing, especially with my granny and Jasper, who both had cancer. Jasper had all these horrible, painful tumours on his side, and he was so sad, and he was in so much pain his last few days. And as much as I miss them, I know that death was the best thing, because it stopped them suffering anymore. But for another thing, I know that I'm not just living my life waiting for something. I'm not living my life waiting to be reunited with them. I know that they're gone, and it's okay for me to move on, and I think that's a really, really important lesson to learn. And it makes the memories that I have with them all the more special and meaningful. I mean, imagine if I just spent my life waiting to get Jasper back. Because let's be honest, no religion can guarantee that would ever happen. If I just sat around waiting to get my dog back when I die, would I even be considering getting another dog right now? Probably not. And then I'd miss out on the happiness of raising another dog. Me and Dan wouldn't have the opportunity for our family to grow with a dog. And some poor little dog would be out there in an animal shelter right now, maybe not being adopted by loving parents. We'd miss out, and the dog would miss out, and everyone would miss out, just because I was waiting to be reunited with Jasper. I know that sounds like a silly extreme example, and I know bringing dogs into it might make some people think I'm kind of trivializing this stuff, but to me, a dog is as much a part of the family as a blood relative. And you could apply it to anyone who's lost a husband and who doesn't want to move on with a new relationship because they're waiting to be reunited with their husband. I think understanding that death is a final ending helps people move on, and it helps us realize that it's okay for us to carry on living and enjoying our life afterwards. What's important is that we remember that even though losing people we love and care about is hard, we're still left here, and we have this incredible opportunity left to go on and make sure that their memory is never forgotten, that it still lives on, and that things that they've created or taught, or just the people they were, they're never just forgotten. They still kind of survive, and they're still important.
Thanks again, Rachel. Nicely said. Now, the last thing I want to say is that if the perspectives that me and Rachel have just given you simply don't feel like enough, then know that you're not alone. They're not enough for me either. I want to see my grandfather again, and I want to consciously exist for a little longer than just a few decades. But if reality has any lesson to be learned, it is that wishing for things doesn't make it so. I also want to end world hunger, animal cruelty, and religion, but my mere wishing this does absolutely nothing. Anyhow, there's a great deal more that I can say on the subject of death, and perhaps I will do so in the future. But for now, I want to conclude by giving a massive shout out to everybody who has, or is currently, grieving without belief. I salute you for looking death straight in the eyes rather than closing your own, and for your courage and conviction to embrace a harsh reality over comforting lies. As always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and to those of you who have donated to the channel via PayPal. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not overwhelmed by your support and trust in me to create relatable content, and it's important to me that you know this. Thank you. And of course, please do be sure to check out Rachel's excellent channel, which I've linked to below. She's a breath of fresh air, entertaining, and an all-out wonderful person. Until next time, my fellow apes. Until next time.